Hello everyone, the 2024 NFL season is just about halfway over, so that means it is time for another 2025 NFL Draft mock draft. We are going to go ahead and go through all 32 teams with the current draft order, and this is going to be our first rendition with trades as well. And looking at the very top of the draft, I think that this is where we're going to have our very first trade. Right now we have the Patriots on the clock. I do think that they could take Travis Hunter. You could take an offensive lineman. There's definitely some guys that could certainly help out Drake May and this offense. But I think they're going to be looking to target one of those offensive tackles a couple spots down. And I think a team that makes a ton of sense is the Las Vegas Raiders to come up, get their quarterback of the future. It was rumored that they were really interested in Jayden Daniels and some of the quarterbacks in this class last year. So I think this time they don't mess around. They go get their guy. It's not really as much of an exercise as how much they'll have to give up. You'd have to imagine it's likely going to be, a first this year and next year, and then maybe like a third round pick or something like that. So we'll go with that. I think that I'm not as worried about kind of exactly what the trade capital it would take to come up and get this pick for the Raiders, but I think that at this point, it's interesting to see what the draft would look like with the Raiders at the top, and I have them going with a quarterback, and I'm going with Cam Ward out of Miami. I think so far he probably has shown the most out of any quarterback so far, just simply based off of their film. He has a ton of big-time throws. He's a creator. He's somebody that can absolutely make plays with his legs as well. You look at his PFF grades, 23 big-time throws, a 6.6 big-time throw percentage. He's cut down on his turnover-worthy plays, though that still is part of his game. He's an improviser. He'll run around and make plays for you. Sometimes it can get him into trouble a little bit, but it's also what truly makes him special as well. I think right now he's probably the most likely quarterback to go first, and maybe first overall as well, but we'll ultimately see kind of how that plays out. I think the Raiders need to come up and go get their guy. And number 2 for the Jaguars, going to go with Travis Hunter out of Colorado. I think that he could play either way. I still think he's going to be the best at corner with kind of sub-packages at wide receiver. I think that's where he would be truly special. The Jaguars could absolutely use a corner opposite Tyson Campbell. I think they really need to upgrade that spot, but also wide receiver. If he is looking to play full-time wide receiver and you take him with this number 2 pick here, I think that that's something where you could definitely continue to add to this wide receiver room for Trevor Lawrence. Sure, you've got Brian Thomas, who's looked awesome so far, but that's not stopping you from drafting a talent like Travis Hunter to pair with him and hopefully elevate this offense as you bring in most likely a new coach, as I don't think Doug Peterson will be around. I'll be interested to see kind of how NFL teams evaluate Travis Hunter, but I think overall he would be best at corner, but is most likely to play wide receiver. The Saints at number 3, I had a lot of trouble with because if you look at their depth chart, kind of their cap situation, everything, this team is old, bad, and they just fired their head coach. I would say this is the time for the Saints to finally stop kicking the can down the road, eat up the dead cap, and try to rebuild. And it's probably going to be a long, painful rebuild because they've been putting it off for years and years. But I'm going to have to imagine that there's going to be some kind of fire sale, a new regime and culture entirely, and I think there's going to be tons of changes. And at that point, you don't really know where this team is going to go. I went with Mason Graham out of Michigan, pair him with Brian Brzee, who has flashed a little bit in his second year out of Clemson. I think Mason Graham, he's a truly special run stuffer. He has really good athleticism to rush the passer as well. Getting that combination and upgrading the defensive line, I think, is going to be big, especially when you're probably not drafting a quarterback to begin competing right now. I think you maybe see what you have in Spencer Rattler, build out the defense, build out the offensive line, and kind of see where that gets you and go from there. Then at pick number 4 for the Carolina Panthers, I've mocked quarterback here before. I could absolutely see that being the case, but just for the sake of the argument, we've already gone that route. Bryce Young did play well and got a win in the most recent game for this Panthers team against a really bad Saints team, but maybe they don't go with quarterback because this roster still seems like it is a little bit further away than just a quarterback away. I'm going to go with an edge rusher, and I think that this guy is going to be shooting up boards. Abdul Carter out of Penn State. You look at his pass rush win rate, 17.9. True pass rush set passing rush grades, 90.1. 86.6 overall. He is a really, really talented player. And you look at his stats, he has 5 sacks already. He kind of started off a little bit slow, but has really come on recently. I think his athletic testing is going to be really special. I do think that he is eventually going to be a top 5 pick in this draft, and I have Abdul Carter going to the Panthers there at number 4. And number 5 for the Cleveland Browns, I do have them going with quarterback here. I just don't think you can simply go into next season with Deshaun Watson as your quarterback. And I know that that is going to cause massive cap and money issues. I understand the implications of doing that, but he has genuinely been the worst quarterback in the NFL. The offense looks much upgraded with Jameis Winston in there. I'm going to go with Shedeur Sanders. It just kind of seems like the Browns type of pick here. He's very confident. He's accurate. He takes care of the football. There are NFL traits in there. I'm personally not quite as high on Shedeur Sanders. I don't have him being this, top 10 quarterback type of pick, but I do think that he does have some traits that do make him an effective passer within the pockets, within structure, being able to read out defenses and make plays. This Browns team, honestly, everything is kind of falling apart. I think they're going to also be going into a rebuild. So I think getting a new quarterback does make sense for this Browns team. And then for the Patriots, that ends very nicely for them. They trade back and they get their pick of offensive tackles. I am ultimately going to go with Kelvin Banks because I think he is a little bit better of a pass protector. You look at his grades, his pass protection grades, 91.4. Didn't play quite as well against Georgia, and Vanderbilt grades aren't quite as good, but I still think overall Banks, even though he does have a little bit shorter arms, he can play tackle. I think he's effective out there. I think he's a really good player. And ultimately for the Patriots, they need to protect Drake May. And pass protection needs to be the number 1 priority for this team. I don't think there's anyone better in this draft than Kelvin Banks. For the Giants, this is another team I kind of went back and forth on. You could get a Tetairoa McMillan, you could get a Will Johnson, some playmakers, but ultimately, you just cannot do the Daniel Jones thing again. It's just not something that you can sell to your fans anymore. It's not something that you can continue to build around. And because of that, I am going quarterback. I think that there's a couple of different options you could go with. Jalen Milroe, Garrett Nussmeier, some of those guys, even Drew Aller or Quinn Ewers. I think those are both very physically talented guys that could maybe be up in this conversation, but I'm not sure there's going to be a run of like 6 quarterbacks in the top 15 picks like we saw in this past draft. I think there's going to be guys that have preferences. I do think that Cam Ward, most likely Shedeur Sanders, will go top 10. And then it's going to be kind of preference. Maybe it's Milroe. Maybe it's Nussmeier. Some of these guys might go back to school as well. But for this exercise, I'm going with Jalen Milroe. He is a special athlete. He's got a big arm. He does put the ball in harm's way a little bit too often. He's not the best when it comes to the pure kind of intangibles of quarterback play. But he's also one of the best athletes I've ever seen at the position. They use his legs so often at Alabama, and he truly does provide a difference in the numbers game when it comes to his rushing threat, his ability to escape the pocket and run. I think his passing has taken a step up this year. He is very up and down player. So you're going to have to be okay with that when you draft Milroe, but I think it at least gives you more hope than doing the Daniel Jones experiment all over again for what feels like the millionth year in a row. Next up for the Dolphins at number 8. You could go in a couple different directions here as well, but I think it has to be offensive line. That's got to be priority number 1 because obviously you're paying him a lot, and unless he medically retires, which it doesn't sound like is in the plans at all for him, you've got to get better protection. This offensive line has been a liability. The entire point of this offense, Tua gets the ball out, he makes reads, he anticipates, he makes throws, is a distributor of the offense, but he can't do that when he's either injured or he is not given the protection to be able to do that. So I'm going to go with Will Campbell out of LSU. I think you could start him at guard because he does have shorter arms as well. And then you could absolutely kick him out to tackle when Teron Armstead inevitably gets injured because it happens pretty much every single year for this Dolphins team. So I think he may start on the interior and then kick out to left tackle once that's needed of him. So I do think that he provides some flexibility. He could be good within that zone blocking scheme and somebody that the Dolphins would definitely like to get their hands on at pick number 8 there. Then for number 9 for the Titans, they're another team where quarterback is a need, but I'm not sure you really love taking any of these guys in the top 10. And so I'm going to go a different route and get whoever our eventual quarterback is a playmaker. And that's Tetairoa McMillan. He's huge. You look at him, he's 6'5", 212 pounds. He's had a great year thus far. He has 63 receptions, over 1,000 yards, 6 touchdowns, had some monstrous games throughout the year. So he's somebody that I do think can go pretty high. He's somebody that, may be the first weapon off the board drafted here. And I'm going to go with McMillan for this Titans team. You pair him with some of those other guys that you have. It's an aging wide receiver core. You trade away DeAndre Hopkins. You have, other guys in that room, but you need a true star. And I think you could potentially get that guy with McMillan here. At pick number 10 for the Jets, this one's hard as well because you look at offensive line, that's on the table, but really quarterback is a question mark with Aaron Rodgers. Tight ends, sure, you could maybe take Colston Loveland, but defense on the other side of the ball, I think corner is a big need. DJ Reed is likely going to be a free agent, and he might walk. Sauce Gardner isn't the same player that he was the first 2 years of his career. Now, corner is a very volatile position, so I think he'll get back to form. But what if you could pair him with Will Johnson, who might be one of the best corner prospects, in this class, and I think he is a really good one that we've seen over the years as well. I think pairing the two of them could be a massive selling point for this defense. They have other holes, but at some point, sometimes just taking best player available in a relative position of need is the best option. And I think that even though this Jets offense hasn't been what they had hoped for, continuing to add to the defense, adding a really, really good player in Will Johnson, that's not a bad idea at all. At pick number 10, the Cowboys, they just cannot help themselves. I think if they're in this position at pick number 11, Ashton Jeanty is going to be a Dallas Cowboy. And if you haven't seen my scouting report video on Ashton Jeanty, you should check it out after this video. I'll link it in the description down below. But Jeanty is somebody with insane contact balance. He has great explosiveness, and truly he has just exploded over the competition this entire year. He has just dominated every single team that he's gone up against. Look at his stats. I mean, over 1,500 yards. He's averaging 8 yards per attempt, 20 touchdowns. He is a special player, and he's somebody that could really transform this Cowboys running game. I think they are a team that does want to, get physical, be able to run the football, and I think Jeanty would absolutely provide that ability. Next up for the Indianapolis Colts, definitely thought about a lot of different positions and team needs for them. You could take Benjamin Morris and get that outside corner. You could get, a center or an interior offensive lineman, but I don't think the value is there at a lot of positions of need. I mean, look at their top 3 positions of need according to PFF: tight end, linebacker, and safety. You add in running back, and those are probably the least valuable positions on offense and defense, at least. So maybe you're not in need of major areas besides maybe a quarterback, depending on what happens with Anthony Richardson. I like their receivers. I like their running game. Their offensive line is decent. I think there's some good players here, but it doesn't necessarily match exactly what I loved about the board. So honestly, I just went with the best player that is available at a potential area of need. Blackman's a free agent. Malachi Starks, he's somebody that can play in the slot. He can play safety. Getting someone reliable on the back end of that defense, I think, would be huge for this Colts team. Maybe a little bit earlier than I would want to take a safety that I don't think is truly special. But I do think that Starks is a really good player for this Colts team, and I could definitely see him being a top 15 pick. So I don't think that's a reach by any means. At pick number 13 for the Cincinnati Bengals, their pass rush outside of Trey Hendrickson has been pretty atrocious. Miles Murphy came back from injury, has not looked like the kind of player they drafted him to be. The interior pressure has been a problem as well. I think you could absolutely argue Kenneth Grant, but they've drafted a lot of guys on the interior: McKinley Jackson, Chris Jenkins, Sheldon Rankins assigned to a long-term deal. BJ Hill's a free agent, but you might bring him back. On the edge, Joseph Osai, Cam Sample, those guys aren't for sure going to be around. Sam Hubbard and Miles Murphy haven't looked super great. So I'm going to go with Nick Scorton. He's their kind of edge rusher as well. You'll look at his kind of talent: 6'4", 285 pounds. He's a big-bodied, really productive dude. He has a really good spin move. Pass rush moves are there. 4 sacks so far this year. And I think overall he's a guy that can defend the run and the pass and is a really productive player for Texas A&M. I could definitely see the Bengals liking someone like him at pick number 13. For the Seahawks at number 14, I think right tackle has been a major issue for this team. Obviously, Abraham Lucas, his inability to stay healthy has been a problem, but I think the offensive line in general is rough outside of maybe Charles Cross and a couple decent flashes here and there from some of the other guys. I'm going to go with Cam Williams, who I think would really allow you to solidify the right tackle spot. He's somebody that is really young. He's talented. He's had some rough games. You look at Michigan. You look at Georgia. Those PFF grades, not ideal by any means. But I think he's somebody that's still young. He's still learning. He's got a ton of physical talent. And you look at his long arms, 6'5", 335 pounds. He's somebody that really could turn into a special player if he's given the opportunity to grow and learn and be in a good environment for that. I think the Seahawks could really allow him to, do really well with Ryan Grubb and that offensive system. I think he could be a really good pick for this team at pick number 14 there. For the Rams at number 15, I'm also going with an offensive tackle. He was somebody that I think would have been ranked so much higher than this had he not gotten injured. And yes, he did tear his ACL, so he's not going to be able to put out any more great tape like he did earlier on in the season. But I still think that Josh Simmons is going to be a top 25 draft pick most likely. As long as there's no long-term issues with the ACL injury, we see a lot of guys come back from that injury nowadays. Simmons was playing out of his mind good. The PFF grades don't necessarily reflect that, but I think especially when it comes to pass blocking, he was really, really good for this Ohio State team and somebody that, I do think could be a cornerstone tackle piece for this Rams team that I do think needs some help on the tackle spots. Havenstein's getting old. Left tackle, you just haven't really found your answer there as well. So I think Simmons coming back from an ACL injury, he's probably not going to be able to test at the combine and things like that, but plug in and he can be a really nice offensive, stalwart for their offensive line, which I think is a much needed thing really ever since they've lost Andrew Whitworth. At pick number 16, I think the Buccaneers would be over the moon to be able to get this guy, Mykel Williams out of Georgia. He's really kind of starting to turn it on a little bit. He started out slow, got injured. He wasn't really the guy that, a lot of people had him as the number 1 overall pick in their way too early mock drafts. He wasn't that guy early in the season, but slowly he's starting to turn things on. The pass rush, the power, the athleticism is starting to click a little bit, and I think there's a decent chance that he is really kind of soaring come draft time. I think that he could definitely be a top 20 pick, and getting him at number 16 for a Buccaneers team that does need some juice on the pass rush, I think that would be huge for their team. The 49ers at 17, you could go, with offensive line, no doubt about it. But Benjamin Morrison, another guy that dealt with an unfortunate season-ending injury, I think he was going to be in the conversation for, Hunter and Will Johnson as the best corner in this class. I think he was, really, really athletic. He mirrors well. He matches routes really effectively. I think he could have been in that conversation. Now with the injury, he's more likely going to be kind of in that second tier of corners, but I still think he's a very good chance going to be a first-round pick. And I think that for this 49ers team, he makes a ton of sense. He's very productive when he's out there. I think he can be a really good piece for this 49ers team that does need to add depth to that corner room and eventually a starter, which I think Morrison can certainly be. At pick 18 for the Chicago Bears up next, offensive line is definitely a piece that you can consider here because Caleb Williams has not been upright as much as he should have been this year. But I also think that they could add to the defensive interior. Gervon Dexter has been a pretty nice piece for them. Andrew Billings has been a decent nose tackle, but I think that Zach Pickens has definitely been a bit of a disappointment, and you do not have much depth at all behind those top two guys. I think Kenneth Grant is really too good to pass up here. You look at him, he's maybe the other Michigan defensive tackle, but he's a really well-balanced kind of player where you look at him, he's huge, 6'3", 339 pounds. He's really effective against the run, but he has some pass rush juice as well. I think he is a player that can be disruptive at the next level in the passing game, which is exactly what you're looking for in a top 20 interior defensive lineman pick. So obviously you could go offensive line, take Ursery, you could take, some of these other guys that are available, but I think that Kenneth Grant's probably too good of a value to pass up at a big position of need as well. Then for the Broncos at 19, I think I've made this pick consistently over and over, but I just think it makes a ton of sense. Luther Burden at pick 19 for the Denver Broncos here. They need a guy that's yards after catch. Bo Nix is somebody that likes to get the ball out of his hands, be a director of the offense, get the ball out and into his wide receiver and his playmakers' hands where they can make plays, and that's exactly what Burden needs. He's somebody that, can be an effective deep threat, especially within the slot. He hasn't done it much this year. You look at Brady Cook, I don't think he's been as effective for that Missouri team. But I think, you get a guy that can really get the ball in his hands quickly and effectively. and then let him make moves, that is something that I think Burton could really thrive in. They need to add playmakers. Courtland Sutton and nobody else is just not good enough for your young quarterback. So go get a guy like Luther Burton. I think that could make a lot of sense for the Broncos as well. And then for the Cardinals at 20 here, they're a team that not a lot of people expected to be very good this year. I did pick them to go 9-8, so they're kind of right on track with where I expected them to be. That was maybe one of my better calls in my preseason predictions, but with the Arizona Cardinals, I think they're a team that likes to build through the trenches. They like these kind of tweener types, these big, powerful, athletic guys, and the defensive line is still pretty awful. I mean, you've got LJ Collier starting, you've got other guys that just aren't filled with star talent, and they're playing well. I think Gannon's really doing a really good job getting the most out of these players on the front seven, but getting somebody like LT Overton, for example, you look at him. He is big, 6'5", 283 pounds. He's athletic. And then you look at his stats, 19.8 pass rush win rate, 7.8 run stop rate. He has had really, really good metrics. He's big. He's powerful. He's a little bit like Darius Robinson, who they drafted last year, but I don't think that that's a issue with them having like redundant skill sets or anything. I think that's the kind of player that they really like on their front seven, and I think Overton would make a lot of sense for this team here. At pick number 21 for the Chargers, Colston Loveland's the fun, easy option, but I also think that if we're looking at this from what John Harbaugh wants, we're actually going to go to his alma mater's rival and take Tyleik Williams out of Ohio State. This dude is a beast in the running game. 87.3 run defense grade. He is not necessarily the best pass rusher. I think he can do it. He takes on a lot of double teams, and I think that he does have some athleticism for as big as he is and his size. He has 3 sacks this year, but he is truly a big run-stuffing nose tackle. They need that in the middle of this Chargers defense. At 6'3", 327 pounds, he's a mammoth. He can two-gap. He can eat blocks. That's exactly what Harbaugh wants, and I would not be at all surprised to see Tyleik Williams in the first round, especially to this Chargers team here. And then we've got the Falcons up next, another team that needs to add pass rush. And another guy that I think is starting to kind of turn things on a little bit is James Pierce Jr., another guy that was very, very highly thought of. He was the number 1 pick in my way too early mock draft over the summer, and he's really kind of starting to put things together. He has 5 sacks now, a 22% pass rush win rate. You look at his last 4 games, Arkansas, Florida, Alabama, Kentucky, he's really kind of starting to turn things on. The pass rush is cranking up. His athleticism is beginning to show. He's kind of combining his athleticism with pass rush moves now. I think Pierce is somebody that is likely going to get back into that top 15, top 10 even conversation when it's all said and done, because I think he's going to have a really strong end of the year, elite athletic testing, and people are no longer going to forget that James Pierce Jr. is a really, really special player on the edge. I think that getting him here would be a fantastic get for this Falcons team that needs to continue to add to the pass rush, which feels like it's been a problem for this team for years and years. So getting Pierce would be a big, big get for this front seven. Up next for the Packers, they have very specific requirements in the type of players they draft, and Siobhan Ravel, I think, is a really, really interesting one. He unfortunately had a very early season-ending injury, but he's 6'3", 193 pounds, and then, he was really, really productive. I think that he is a guy that is likely still going to be in that first-round conversation. He may or may not be able to do some of the workouts and stuff like that when it comes to the offseason. Most likely not, but he is a guy that I do think will be really well thought of by a lot of NFL teams. And even though he played at a small school and he's coming off an injury, I still think he could be in this conversation. He's athletic. He's got really sticky coverage. Someone I do still think will be in this conversation. And for the Packers, it makes a lot of sense. Jair Alexander's a really good player, but you just don't have a lot of other guys on that other side. I think Ravel could be a very interesting player for you. For the Ravens at pick number 24, big-time question marks on the offensive line. I still think Ronnie Stanley at left tackle is an upcoming free agent. Makari as well, still a free agent. So I'm going to go with Ariante Ursary out of Minnesota. You look at him, he's starting to put things together a little bit. He had some rough games especially early on the start. Michigan game wasn't great, but he has continued to get better, and I think that he is somebody that a lot of people do like. At 6'6", 330 pounds, he's long, he's talented. I think for this Ravens team, it makes a lot of sense to get him on Lamar Jackson's blind side and be kind of that hopeful franchise left tackle if you do decide to move on from Ronnie Stanley. At the Texans pick at number 25 here, I think you've got to replace Kenyon Green. He has been a big-time liability for this offensive line, and I think it is time to move on. And I'm going to have the Texans taking the first interior offensive lineman, Tyler Booker, out of Alabama. He's just kind of a rock in that Alabama offense. He is a good run blocker. He's a good pass protector. I think he uses his hands effectively. For this Texans team, you need to surround C.J. Stroud with talent, protect him at all costs. You have a ton of really good wide receivers once they get back from injury. Maybe next season, it might not be this year, but Nico Collins, Stephon Diggs, Tank Dell, you've got talent at this wide receiver spot, and you know how good C.J. Stroud is. Protect him no matter what. Booker is an investment in doing that. This Eagles team is starting to fly a little bit down the stretch. They're finding their identity a little bit more offensively. I still think they can continue to add to the front seven on defense. Linebacker, we know they won't take with Howie Roseman at the helm. I'm going to go Donovan Aziruaku out of Boston College. 15.5% pass rush win rate. He has been really effective. 6 sacks so far this year. And he's somebody that I highlighted on Twitter or X. I think he's a really good high-effort run stuffer as well. He does a good job setting the edge. I think that he does show a lot of pro readiness at this position. It's something they do need at this spot. Brandon Graham, Josh Sweat, a lot of these guys aren't necessarily going to be here long-term. So getting another guy in that room to pair with Nolan Smith and some of the other guys you got in there, I think Aziruaku could be a very interesting fit for this Philly front seven. Then for the Steelers at pick number 27, I think you got to go wide receiver. And if you believe Russell Wilson, Justin Fields, both of them, whatever it is, the offense is working, but I think you need to continue to get playmakers for those guys because, George Pickens is still the predominant wide receiver on this offense, and he's not exactly the most stable player as well. So I'm going to get somebody like Isaiah Bond. I definitely thought about Emeka Egbuka as well, who's had a really, really good year, but Bond has that true game-breaking speed. And I know the Steelers do have some of those types of guys, but none of them are even on the same playing field as Isaiah Bond. So we're going to go with him here. I think he could be that Calvin Austin replacement upgrade, basically, where he is truly just being able to stretch the defense, be a game changer. And if you still do have Russell Wilson, his moon balls deep downfield to Isaiah Bond will be a sight to behold. So I think that could be a fun combination there. For the Vikings at pick number 28, I'm going to go with a little bit of a different pick here. He has played really, really well, though. I'm going to go with Jahdae Barron out of Texas. He is somebody that in-zone coverage has been really effective this year. He's kind of bounced around. He's been a nickel. He's been a safety. Now he's a true outside cornerback. And I think that has really allowed him to kind of have a really good idea of the defensive coverages. I think he's a really, really smart, instinctive player. Has 3 interceptions already this year. Maybe isn't the perfect scheme fit for what Brian Flores and this defense like to do with man-to-man coverage and blitzing and stuff like that. But I think his instincts, his production do speak for themselves. I think Jahdae Barron is a really, really interesting player. And I do think he is somebody that can sneak into the back end of the first round with how well he is playing right now. Now the Commanders at pick 29. Who would have thought that the Commanders would be here in a midseason mock draft, but good for them. I still think they can continue to add to the offensive line. And I think that Jaden Daniels does a good job masking some of those problems. But Wyatt Millum has been awesome for West Virginia. Look at his PFF grades. 92.1 overall. Has not given up a sack. Has not given up a hit. Has not given up a hurry, according to PFF system here. A 90.1 run blocking grade as well. He's really effective in that zone blocking scheme, getting him on the move. He has had great PFF stats across the board, and his tape is really, really good as well. At left tackle, I think he could provide some big-time, long-term stability on Jaden Daniels' behind side, and I think he is somebody that is really, really productive and has shown that he can do it against good competition. So I like that pick for the Commanders there. Then at pick number 30 for the Buffalo Bills, this guy that I want to take for him is actually not on the board. His name is Omar Norman Lott. He is the defensive tackle out of Tennessee. and he has turned in a great year for the Volunteer defense. He is somebody that I think is really kind of very productive. When you look at his background, he started at Arizona State, transferred over to Tennessee, has been there 2 years. His PFF grades aren't really anything super crazy special, but 18 total pressures, 3 sacks, 5 hits, 10 hurries. He's a disruptor in the middle of that defense, but he's also a productive run stuffer as well. I think that when you look at his profile, 6'3", 315 pounds, he's a penetrator, he plays with high effort. He's somebody that will definitely kind of be in this conversation. Trevor Sikkema, who does the PFF grading, and mock draft board here, he said that Norman Lott's actually going to be his defensive tackle too, based on his rewatches. They just haven't gotten him into the system yet here. So I'm going to take Deion Walker as kind of the replacement, but this pick is Omar Norman Lott, the defensive tackle out of Tennessee here. So we'll go ahead and select him here. Then we have 2 more picks, the Lions and the Chiefs. I've made this pick before as well, but I think it makes so much sense. The Lions have to add a second pass rusher, another high-effort guy that fits the culture, and I don't think there's anybody that does it better than Jack Sawyer. And you look at his stats, it's nothing impressive. 3 total sacks. Over the course of his career, he really hasn't been a big-time sack guy, but he does have a pretty good pass rush win percentage. Ohio State will line him up all over the formation. He'll be an edge rusher. He'll line up over the A-gap to stand-up rusher, blitzing, looping, stunts, all that kind of stuff. Stuff that the Lions do like to do. And I think he is productive in that regard, but he's also a really, really good run defender as well. An 81.6 run defense grade, that's what allows him to be a 3-down type of player and somebody that still could be a first-round pick in this draft, even though he doesn't have the ridiculously impressive sack numbers. And then at pick number 32 for the Kansas City Chiefs, we're actually going to make a second trade here. Somebody coming into the back end of the first round to potentially get a 5th-year option for their player. And I'm going to go with the Tennessee Titans here. We already had them getting Tetairoa McMillan. Not sure exactly what it would take. Likely something like this. But again, I'm not too worried about what exactly the draft capital looks like. This is all just for fun to kind of see different scenarios here. So we have the Titans. We had them taking McMillan at pick number 9 earlier. I'm going to have them pairing McMillan with a young rookie quarterback. I don't think that they're going to go into next season with Will Levis as kind of the unquestioned starter along with Mason Rudolph. I think Brian Callahan has made it pretty clear he's not interested in either one of those guys being his long-term option at quarterback. Somebody I really do like, and I'm not sure if he's going to declare or if he'll stay in school, and I know he had a rough game against Texas A&M in the second half, but Garrett Nussmeier, he is somebody that I truly do think could end up as the best quarterback in this class. I think his pocket mobility is really impressive. He anticipates. He's accurate. Yes, he's a gunslinger. He's a bit of a risk taker. But this is his first true year as a starter at LSU. Backed up Jaden Daniels. He is somebody that I think throws with a lot of anticipation, timing, accuracy. He gives his guys chances downfield. And I think he will learn from his mistakes. I'm excited to see how he comes back from adversity. He needs to take better care of the ball. No doubt about it. But I think he is somebody that could turn into a really good quarterback. And I think that at just 22 years old, I think that this Titans team may want to take a swing at a quarterback, get that extra 5th-year option, trade back into the back end of the first round, and get their guy. So let me know your thoughts on this 2025 mid-season mock draft here. Who do you want your favorite team to take? Who are some of the underrated sleepers that you're really targeting for your favorite team? Let me know all your thoughts in the comments down below. If you like this kind of content, more NFL draft content, scouting, player reports, mock drafts, all that good stuff is going to be coming at you quickly on this channel. So please hit that subscribe button down below. While you're down there, hit the like button as well. Both of those things do truly support the channel. It means so much to me. Thank you so much for watching. I will catch you in the next one.